Have you ever found yourself stuck in a confined space, feeling the walls close in, your heart racing, your mind spinning with thoughts of what could go wrong? Now, imagine that very scenario leading to an unexpected twist, an opportunity that could change your life forever. This isn't just a figment of imagination, it's a real story that unfolded when a woman found herself trapped in an elevator, and what happened next defied all expectations. In today's video, we're diving into a remarkable tale that blurs the lines between fate and coincidence. It's a story of resilience, chance encounters, and the unpredictable nature of life. As we explore this narrative, you'll discover how a seemingly unfortunate event can set the stage for something truly extraordinary. But before we delve deeper, let me ask you, have you ever experienced a moment when everything seemed to go wrong, only to find that it was the beginning of something better? Hold on to that thought as we journey through this incredible story. Our protagonist, a woman like many of us, was going about her day when an unexpected turn of events led her into an elevator. Little did she know, this elevator ride would become the catalyst for a series of events that would alter the course of her life. As the elevator doors closed, she felt a sense of normalcy, unaware of the twist fate had in store. But then, the unexpected happened. The elevator came to an abrupt halt. The lights flickered, and the usual hum of the machinery ceased. She pressed the emergency button, but there was no response. Minutes turned into hours, and the reality of being trapped began to sink in. In those moments of isolation, she reflected on her life, her choices, and the path that had led her to this point. She thought about her career, her aspirations, and the opportunities she had let slip by. But amidst the uncertainty, a thought emerged, a realization that perhaps this moment, as challenging as it was, could be the turning point she had been waiting for. As time passed, she noticed a subtle shift in her perspective. What began as a distressing situation transformed into an opportunity for introspection and growth. She started to see the elevator not as a trap, but as a space for reflection and clarity. Then, just when she thought things couldn't get more surreal, the elevator jolted back to life. The doors opened, and standing there was someone unexpected, a figure who would play a pivotal role in the unfolding of this story. This encounter sparked a series of events that would lead her down a path she had never anticipated. An opportunity emerged, one that seemed to be a direct result of her time spent in that confined space. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring her to this precise moment, to this exact place, for a reason she was yet to understand. But what exactly happened during those moments in the elevator? How did this chance encounter lead to a life-changing opportunity? And what can we learn from her experience? Stay with us as we unravel this captivating story, exploring the twists and turns that led to an unexpected job offer. By the end of this video, you'll not only be amazed by the events that transpired but also inspired by the resilience and openness to opportunity that our protagonist demonstrated. So, if you've ever wondered how a single moment can alter the course of your life, if you've ever believed that fate has a way of guiding us to where we need to be, then this story is for you. Keep watching, because the journey is just beginning, and the best part is yet to come. But before we continue, let me ask you, what would you do if you found yourself in a similar situation? How would you respond to the unexpected? Think about it, and let's dive deeper into this incredible journey. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing her inside the confined space, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The day had started like any other, routine, predictable, and ordinary. She had woken up to the sound of her alarm, gone through her morning rituals, and dressed in her usual attire, a crisp blouse and tailored pants, the uniform of a professional navigating the corporate world. But today felt different. There was an undercurrent of unease she couldn't quite place. She had been on her way to a meeting with a potential client, a significant opportunity that could propel her career forward. The building was a towering structure of glass and steel, its sleek design reflecting the bustling city below. As she entered the elevator, she noticed a man standing at the back, his face partially obscured by a newspaper. Their eyes met briefly, and she offered a polite smile, which he returned with a nod. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind shared by strangers who acknowledge each other's presence without intrusion. But as the elevator ascended, a subtle tension began to build. The man shifted, lowering his newspaper to reveal a phone in his hand. He tapped away at it with rapid precision, his brow furrowed in concentration. She couldn't help but wonder what he was reading or who he was communicating with. Was he a colleague? A competitor? Or someone entirely unrelated? The possibilities swirled in her mind, each more intriguing than the last. Suddenly, the elevator jolted, a sharp lurch that sent her heart racing. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the polished walls. The man looked up, his expression unreadable. They exchanged a brief glance, both silently acknowledging the unexpected turn of events. The elevator came to a halt, the soft hum of its machinery ceasing abruptly. An unsettling silence enveloped them, broken only by the faint sound of their breathing. She pressed the emergency button, her finger trembling slightly. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, more forcefully this time. Still, no response. Panic began to creep in, its icy fingers tightening around her chest. She glanced at the man, but he remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the floor. Was he as unsettled as she was? Or was he hiding his own fears behind a mask of composure? Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. She tried to call for help, but her phone had no signal. The air grew thick, oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in on her. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, each passing second amplifying her sense of isolation. Then, just as she was beginning to lose hope, the elevator lurched back to life. The lights flickered once more, and the soft hum of the machinery resumed. The doors opened, revealing the lobby of the building. She stepped out, her legs unsteady beneath her, and looked around. The man was gone. Had he ever been there at all? The more she looked, the darker it got. She traced online mentions of ecosystems to obscure Reddit threads, deep forums on cybersecurity and whistleblower platforms. One thread claimed the company was a front for testing predictive behavioral algorithms, technology that monitored individuals, predicted their decisions, and manipulated outcomes. It sounded insane, like something out of a late-night conspiracy rabbit hole. But then she remembered the job offer, the suspicious timing, the eerie surveillance footage, and suddenly, it didn't feel so far-fetched. The real twist came when she found an old post from a user who claimed to be a former employee. They recruit by force. Watch the elevators, the post read. If you get stuck, it's already too late. She stared at those words for a long time, the eerie resonance almost too much to take. Later that week, as she tried to act normal at work, she noticed another employee, a woman from accounting named Lena, acting strangely. Lena avoided eye contact, looked visibly shaken, and had begun wearing a small pin on her blazer, a triangular symbol that looked oddly familiar. She didn't think much of it until she saw that same symbol embedded in one of the redacted files from Project Echo. She confronted Lena gently, trying not to spook her, asking about the pin. Lena's face paled, and she whispered, "Don't ask questions about the triangle. Trust me. I tried." Before she could say more, one of the supervisors passed by, and Lena immediately changed the subject. That small moment told her everything she needed to know. Lena knew something. And she was terrified of what would happen if she said too much. But just as she was beginning to plan a way to meet with Lena in private, the unexpected happened again. Her company laptop, which had held copies of all the confidential files she'd found, suddenly refused to turn on. Not just a battery issue or software crash, it had been wiped clean. Completely bricked. She rushed to check her backups, but the cloud storage she had been using was now locked behind a new verification step, and her phone number was no longer recognized. Her digital footprint was being erased right before her eyes. Someone had made a move. And this time, they weren't just watching, they were silencing. Then came the final twist of the week. As she sat down at her desk the next morning, a new file had been placed on top of her keyboard. No name, no note, just a thick manila envelope. Inside it was a printed transcript of a phone call. The names were blacked out, but the voices were unmistakable. One was hers. The other was Jamie's. The call had taken place months ago. But what shocked her most was the content, words they never said, phrases they never exchanged. It had been manipulated. Fabricated. Someone was trying to create a version of the past that never happened. And worse, they had the technology to do it flawlessly. At that moment, she knew, This wasn't just a company with secrets. This was something deeper, something that could change not just her life, but how reality itself was perceived. And the more she tried to expose the truth, the more it pushed back. She had allies, but maybe even those were illusions. Every new clue contradicted the last, every truth was a maybe, and everyone she thought she could trust, including her own memories, was now suspect. The question wasn't just what's really going on, anymore. It had become, how far are they willing to go to keep it hidden? The day everything shifted from eerie to outright terrifying began with a scream. Not hers, but someone else's, a sound that sliced through the silence of the office like a jagged blade. It came from 2 floors below, echoing up through the elevator shaft just before the building was suddenly plunged into an emergency lockdown. Sirens blared overhead, flashing lights casting long red streaks across the walls, and an automated voice calmly repeating that all employees were to remain at their workstations until further notice. She stood at her desk, paralyzed, her heart pounding so violently it felt like it would rupture. Her thoughts instantly went to Jamie. She reached for her phone, but there was no service. Again. This time, not just in the elevator, but the entire building was digitally severed, no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, and no internal network. It wasn't just a glitch. It was a deliberate severing, and the timing couldn't be a coincidence. As minutes stretched with no updates, the fear in her chest grew heavier, morphing from anxiety into something deeper, more primal. People in the office tried to appear calm, but their eyes darted toward one another with unease, conversations reduced to whispers. She watched the hallway, waiting for Lena to appear, hoping to find someone who might know what was happening. But Lena never came. Hours later, after the lockdown lifted and people cautiously resumed their work, she went looking for her. Lena's office was empty. Desk cleared. No files, no notes, nothing. It was as if she had never existed. HR claimed she'd submitted a resignation earlier that morning and left on her own accord. But that was impossible. Lena had told her just days ago that she was afraid, that she was being watched. People don't just vanish without a word unless they're made to. The hallway security cameras? Conveniently under maintenance. No footage, no trace, no witnesses. Just silence. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her apartment, once a place of comfort, felt too exposed. Every creak in the walls, every hum of the refrigerator, suddenly felt like something more, a microphone, a hidden camera, a sign that someone had been there. She kept the blinds shut tight and moved her laptop to a drawer, the paranoia now fully embedding itself into her routine. She began checking behind furniture, under the bed, inside closets, not because she expected to find someone, but because she couldn't trust herself not to look. She knew something had shifted. Lena's disappearance was a message. Not a warning, but a consequence. Keep digging, and this is what happens. Then the package arrived. No return address, no postage, just a small cardboard box left outside her door in the dead of night. Inside, folded neatly on top of a bed of packing foam, was a photograph. It was old, yellowed at the corners, the kind you'd find in a family album. In it, a younger version of her stood on a beach with her father, smiling, holding a plastic shovel in one hand. The picture was clearly taken decades ago, from a family vacation she barely remembered, so how did they get it? And why that one? She hadn't seen that photo in years. Her father had passed away when she was in college, and the last box of his belongings had never made it from storage to her apartment. This meant someone had gone through her past, physically, intimately, digging not just into her present life but her history. It wasn't surveillance anymore, it was a statement. They knew who she was, down to the grain of her childhood. The fear gave way to a creeping sense of helplessness. Her control was slipping, like sand pouring through her fingers no matter how tightly she tried to hold on. She started seeing the same silver sedan parked across from her apartment building for 3 nights in a row. Always different plates. The driver never stepped out, never moved. When she approached to get a better look, the car pulled away slowly, deliberately. It didn't speed off. It wanted to be seen. Wanted her to know she was being monitored. A psychological checkmate. Someone was always one step ahead. She began to question every face she passed on the street. The friendly woman at the coffee shop who remembered her order, had she always worked there? The man who asked for directions on the corner, was that conversation just a distraction? Her world shrank to the space between her door and the corners of her mind, every unknown now a potential threat, every familiar face now suspect. In a last-ditch effort to ground herself, she revisited her father's old storage unit, hoping to find the box the photo might have come from. When she arrived, the lock had already been removed. Inside, everything was gone. The unit was empty, swept clean like it had never housed a single belonging. She stood there for what felt like hours, the hollow shell of the unit reflecting back the same emptiness she felt inside. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to intimidate her. They were erasing her. Rewriting her story before she could finish telling it. The records, the connections, even the tangible pieces of her past slowly disappearing. On her way home, she noticed something new. A billboard above the freeway flashing a generic tech company ad. She wouldn't have thought twice about it if it weren't for the brief, glitched frame that flashed for just a second before the main image returned. She almost missed it. But in that moment, her own face appeared. The same photo from the elevator, distorted and flickering like a corrupted file. Her name in digital letters underneath. No company logo. No explanation. It was like someone had hijacked the billboard feed just long enough to send a message. One she couldn't explain. One she had no way of proving. Now she's no longer just searching for answers. She's fighting to protect what little remains of the life she once had. But with every step forward, the truth becomes more elusive, the trail more convoluted. And deep down, a part of her is beginning to fear that maybe the game didn't start in the elevator that day. Maybe it started long before the job, before the building, before she ever knew she was being watched. And if that's true, then the real question is far more terrifying. What do they want from her, and why her, specifically? The pieces don't fit. Not yet. But something tells her, when they finally do, it won't just be her life that changes, it'll be the whole truth about everything she thought was real. She had reached her limit. Every attempt to trace a lead led to dead ends, every whisper of the truth was followed by silence or sudden disappearances. Her home no longer felt like hers, her thoughts no longer felt safe, and the people around her all seemed either too distant or suspiciously attentive. Sleep became a luxury, and when it did come, it was shallow and filled with dreamlike flashes of faces she couldn't quite place, symbols she'd seen before, and distorted voices repeating words she couldn't understand. She knew something big was about to break, she just didn't expect it to come from the one person she still trusted. Jamie. It started with a simple message from him, the kind siblings send to assure each other they're still out there, still okay, need to talk. Come alone. Don't bring your phone. That alone was strange enough, but the way it was handwritten and slipped into her mailbox when she wasn't home sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't like him. Jamie preferred encrypted messages, anonymous VPNs, burner numbers. But this was deliberate. Desperate. And whatever it was, it felt final. She followed the instructions and met him in the most unlikely place, a remote overlook outside the city, where the wind swallowed their voices and no digital signal could easily reach. When she arrived, Jamie was already there, pacing, jittery, eyes darting like he was expecting to be followed. And then he said it, the sentence that shattered everything she thought she understood. They weren't targeting you. They were recruiting you. She stood still, processing the words, not fully grasping what he meant. Jamie looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He handed her a flash drive, but this one came with no cryptic labels or threatening photos. It was clean. It was intentional. Everything you think was random, the elevator, the job offer, even Lena, all of it was staged. You were chosen because you passed a set of behavioral thresholds. It was a test. They ran simulations based on your digital footprint, your responses to stress, your history with Dad, all of it. You weren't supposed to find out this way. She was stunned into silence. Her mind raced back to all the moments that had felt coincidental but somehow too timed, the job offer that came after a minor viral LinkedIn post, the smooth onboarding into a company she hadn't even applied to, and the way everyone acted just slightly off from the beginning. She remembered the first time she felt truly watched, not in the elevator, but years ago after her father's funeral, When she had received a strange email with nothing but a question, "Would you do anything to make sense of loss?" She had thought it was spam. Now she wasn't sure. Jamie looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen before, not fear, but guilt. He sat on the edge of the bench and confessed the rest, voice low and cracked. "Dad didn't die the way we were told. His heart attack, it wasn't natural. He had been involved in this program years ago, before either of us knew what it really was. He was one of the first test subjects. He tried to pull out after realizing what they were doing, how they were experimenting with behavior manipulation, altering people's environments to influence decision-making on a mass scale. When he tried to leak it, he disappeared. The death certificate was fabricated. I only found out months later when I accessed a set of files buried in a server I wasn't supposed to touch. That's when they came to me, offered a choice, help them monitor new recruits, or become one." Her breath caught in her throat. The pain of losing her father had never fully healed, but now it twisted into something deeper, a betrayal. He had been silenced, and Jamie had known. All this time, Jamie had been part of it, feeding her just enough truth to keep her on the hook while playing both sides. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, voice trembling. His response was immediate and haunted. "Because I thought I could protect you. But it turns out, you were the one they were building everything around. Not me. You're the real prototype." The flash drive he gave her contained records she could barely comprehend, datasets, predictive behavior models, neural pattern simulations, all under her name. In every simulation, they were pushing her toward the same choices. Same emotional spikes. Same confrontation points. She had never been discovering the truth on her own. She had been led. Every time she felt victorious for uncovering something new, it had been planned. She sat in the driver's seat long after Jamie had disappeared into the darkness, staring at the steering wheel like it held the answers she was too afraid to confront. The message on her dead phone hadn't faded. It stayed glowing, a quiet reminder that she was no longer in control, if she ever had been. "You've passed the test." But what test? Who was grading her life like it was some long, twisted experiment? And more importantly, what came next? She wanted to drive, to escape, to feel like she was choosing something, anything, for herself. But her hands wouldn't move. Not because she was scared of what lay ahead, but because of what she had to do next. Confront Jamie. Not just as a brother, but as a participant. As someone who had stood by while strangers orchestrated her life behind mirrored glass. It would break something sacred between them, something built over years of shared pain and silent support. But it had to happen. She couldn't live in a version of her life that was curated by those she trusted the most. When she finally made it back to her apartment, she found the door slightly open. Panic seized her chest, but what chilled her more was the absence of chaos. Nothing was out of place. Not a drawer pulled, not a picture frame shifted. The invasion was quiet, intentional, like a hand brushing her shoulder just to remind her she was never alone. On her kitchen counter sat a manila folder marked Exit Option. Inside was a contract, 2 pages, heavy legal language wrapped in benign language about reassignment and voluntary detachment from ecosystems. It was, essentially, a way out. A signed waiver, a digital wipe, a fresh start in a new city with a new identity, and a lifetime stipend under the condition she asked no more questions. If she signed, they'd make it all disappear. The stress, the surveillance, the fear. It was the first offer of peace she'd had in weeks. But peace, she realized, came with a price, her silence. The ultimatum sat in her lap like a loaded gun. Safety or truth. A life rebuilt on a lie she could learn to forget, or one built on a truth that could kill her. And that truth wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Lena. About her father. About the others whose names she had yet to learn but whose lives had clearly been manipulated and discarded like broken tools in a failed prototype run. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to take the deal, to close the book on this nightmare and let someone else expose it. But what kind of life would that be? Could she ever live with herself knowing she'd been this close to the truth and walked away because it was safer? Her decision became even harder when Jamie showed up at her door the next morning, drenched in rain, hands shaking not from the cold but from fear. He had read the same contract. They'd offered him one too. Only his came with a deadline and a threat: either convince her to sign it, or he'd be held responsible for what came next. He looked at her with eyes that used to make her feel safe, and now only made her feel watched. "They'll go after Mom next," he said softly, barely above a whisper. "She doesn't even know what's happening, but they'll use her. You know they will." And there it was, the impossible choice. She had convinced herself this battle was just about her autonomy, her sanity. But it was so much bigger. Signing the agreement meant erasing herself from their system, letting her mother and Jamie live unbothered, safe, quiet. Refusing it meant dragging them all deeper into a war with an enemy that didn't show its face but always showed its power. There were no good options anymore. Only damage control. The guilt wrapped itself around her ribs like a vice, pressing in until it was hard to breathe. Could she really condemn her family to this life of shadows just so she could chase a truth that might not even survive the daylight? Jamie begged her. Not with words, but with silence, the kind that fills a room with all the things you can't say out loud. He placed the pen beside the contract, like a knife on the table, and left without another word. She sat in that silence for hours, feeling the weight of the pen as if signing her name would trigger something irreversible. Maybe it would. Maybe that was the whole point. But something inside her still pulsed with defiance, a voice too battered to be loud but too stubborn to die. It whispered that if she signed, they wouldn't just win, they'd erase her completely. Her father's warning came rushing back in pieces, half-remembered words in an old voicemail she had almost deleted once. They don't want obedience. They want silence. Don't give it to them. That night, she packed a bag and burned the contract. Not because she had a plan, not because she was brave, but because she realized the game had changed. She wasn't just the prototype anymore. She was the variable. The thing they hadn't accounted for. And maybe that was her power. They'd built a perfect loop, a system that manipulated choices, but what if she made one they didn't predict? But just as the folder turned to ash, her phone lit up with one final notification: no number, no contact, just a screen full of static that slowly resolved into a single line of text: "You made your choice. Now watch what happens next." And in that moment, she knew. The real game was only beginning. The weight of Jamie's words lingered in the air, suffocating her with their implications. She had always believed that uncovering the truth would grant her freedom, but now she realized it had only ensnared her deeper into a web of manipulation and deceit. Her father's death, the strange occurrences, the cryptic messages, it was all part of a larger, more sinister plan. And Jamie, her own brother, had been complicit in it. As she grappled with the enormity of the revelation, the phone buzzed again. This time, the message was clear and chilling: "You can't escape. You're already part of the system." The sender was untraceable, the words a stark reminder that her every move had been anticipated, her every decision accounted for. Desperation clawed at her chest. She needed answers, but the more she sought, the more elusive they became. The people she had trusted, the ones she thought were allies, were now shadows, their motives unclear. Was anyone truly on her side, or had they all been actors in this grand design? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Hesitant, she opened it to find Lena standing there, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "They've taken Jamie," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I tried to warn him, but it was too late." The ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. Jamie, the one person she thought she could rely on, had been taken. But by whom? And why? The questions swirled in her mind, each one more terrifying than the last. Lena handed her a small, encrypted device. "He left this for you," she said. "He said it would help you understand everything." With trembling hands, she activated the device. A video played, Jamie's face appearing on the screen. "If you're watching this," he began, "then they haven't found you yet. But they will. They always do." The video continued, detailing the extent of the conspiracy, the manipulation, and the control exerted over their lives. It was more extensive than she had ever imagined, involving not just their family, but countless others. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut: she wasn't just a victim, she was part of a larger experiment, a test subject in a game she hadn't agreed to play. As the video ended, a new message appeared on the screen: "Time is running out. Trust no one. The room spun around her. Who could she trust? Everyone she had relied on had been part of this scheme. Her father, Jamie, even Lena, had they all been manipulated, or were they willing participants in this twisted game? The phone buzzed again, the screen flashing with an incoming call. The caller ID was blocked. Hesitant, she answered. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're still alive," a cold voice replied. "Impressive. But it won't last. You're a liability now." The line went dead. Her heart raced. She was being hunted, targeted by forces she couldn't comprehend. The walls closed in around her, the weight of the situation pressing down with suffocating intensity. She glanced at Lena, who stood motionless, her expression unreadable. Was she truly an ally, or had she been playing her part in this elaborate ruse all along? The uncertainty gnawed at her, the fear of betrayal lurking in every shadow. She had no choice but to keep moving forward, to seek the truth, no matter the cost. But with each step, the danger escalated, the stakes growing higher. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message, another warning: "You can't outrun us." The game had changed. She wasn't just trying to uncover the truth anymore, she was fighting for her life. And as the night stretched on, she realized the most terrifying truth of all: she was no longer in control. The night had become a labyrinth of shadows and whispers, each corner concealing more than it revealed. She had thought she understood the game, believed she had peeled back the layers of deception, but now, standing in the dimly lit room with the encrypted device in her hand, she realized how little she truly knew. The walls seemed to close in on her, the air thick with the weight of impending revelation. She had followed the breadcrumbs, each one leading her deeper into a maze of manipulation and control, but the final piece was still elusive, just out of reach. Lena's presence beside her was a silent reminder of the stakes. The device hummed softly, its screen flickering as if struggling to display the truth. She had to know what Jamie had uncovered, had to understand the full extent of the conspiracy that had ensnared them all. With a trembling hand, she activated the device, the screen illuminating her face in the darkness. A video began to play, Jamie's voice breaking the silence. "If you're seeing this," his voice crackled, "then they haven't found you yet. But they will. They always do." The video continued, detailing the origins of ecosystems, the shadowy organization that had orchestrated their lives from the very beginning. It was more extensive than she had ever imagined, involving not just their family, but countless others. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut: she wasn't just a victim, she was part of a larger experiment, a test subject in a game she hadn't agreed to play. As the video ended, a new message appeared on the screen: "Time is running out. Trust no one." The room spun around her. Who could she trust? Everyone she had relied on had been part of this scheme. Her father, Jamie, even Lena, had they all been manipulated, or were they willing participants in this twisted game? The phone buzzed again, the screen flashing with an incoming call. The caller ID was blocked. Hesitant, she answered. "Hello," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're still alive," a cold voice replied. "Impressive. But it won't last. You're a liability now." The line went dead. Her heart raced. She was being hunted, targeted by forces she couldn't comprehend. The walls closed in around her, the weight of the situation pressing down with suffocating intensity. She glanced at Lena, who stood motionless, her expression unreadable. Was she truly an ally, or had she been playing her part in this elaborate ruse all along? The uncertainty gnawed at her, the fear of betrayal lurking in every shadow. She had no choice but to keep moving forward, to seek the truth, no matter the cost. But with each step, the danger escalated, the stakes growing higher. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message, another warning: "You can't outrun us." The game had changed. She wasn't just trying to uncover the truth anymore, she was fighting for her life. And as the night stretched on, she realized the most terrifying truth of all: she was no longer in control. The sun had started to rise, casting a soft amber glow across the skyline as she sat on the rooftop of what was once Ecosystem's headquarters, now abandoned and gutted from the inside out. The city below stirred to life, unaware of the battle that had unfolded in the shadows above them. After weeks of running, uncovering secrets, and surviving betrayals that cut deeper than she thought possible, she was still standing. Not untouched, not victorious in the traditional sense, but free in a way she had never been before. The truth had surfaced, and even though it hadn't shattered the world like she once imagined, it had broken the illusion that bound her life. Ecosystems had crumbled not from exposure to the public, but from an implosion within. The chain of trust they depended on had snapped the moment she refused to play by their rules. The files Jamie had hidden, the recordings of boardroom meetings, the data showing years of psychological manipulation across multiple lives, all of it was leaked not to the media, but to those who had unknowingly lived inside the experiment. The truth had been returned to the people it was stolen from, and she could already feel the ripples beginning to spread. She hadn't seen Lena since the final confrontation. Whether she had fled, been silenced, or simply walked away from it all, she would never know. Jamie, in the end, had paid the price he feared all along. He never came back from the extraction site where he claimed he was going to destroy the core servers. The final message he left wasn't one of anger or warning, but of strange relief, his voice calm, resolved, saying he finally understood what their father had meant. That some truths are only meant to be carried, not told. She had played her part in ending the cycle, but even now she wasn't sure if she'd done the right thing. So much had been lost. So many people still had no idea how much of their lives had been choreographed. The ones who did knew better than to speak about it publicly. Even with the collapse of ecosystems, the ghost of its reach lingered. Tech firms quietly rebranding, algorithms quietly adjusting, behavior nudges happening in more subtle ways. She had left her apartment for good. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. Now she moved between cities, never staying long enough to be noticed, always watching, always listening. She took a job under a different name, something simple, something quiet, customer support for a cybersecurity firm ironically built by one of Echo's former shell companies. Sometimes irony is the only currency the universe accepts. She didn't hack systems or chase conspiracies anymore, but every once in a while, someone would ping her through an encrypted thread, send her fragments of something suspicious, and she'd feel that familiar weight in her chest, the pull of unfinished business. Still, she resisted diving back in. The game was never really over, just paused between players. And then, one day, a letter arrived. No postage, no markings, just a thick white envelope left in her hotel mailbox in Portland. Inside was a single photo. The same one from her childhood on the beach with her father, holding a plastic shovel. But in this version, she was not alone. Behind her, blurred in the sunlight, stood a woman she didn't remember ever being there. The edges were clean, no signs of digital tampering, no traces of artificial enhancement. It was as if the woman had always been part of the picture. On the back, a single handwritten note, "Version 2 is watching. Are you ready to lead?" Her hands trembled as she folded the photo back into the envelope. It was over, but it also wasn't. The system had fallen, but the architecture remained. Someone else had picked up the blueprints. And now, whether she wanted it or not, she had become more than just the prototype. She was the precedent. The one who proved it could be done. Her story had been their test run, but she had rewritten the ending. Now, someone else out there was preparing the next chapter, and they were watching her just as closely as she had once been watched. She stood, feeling the morning breeze slide across her skin, the city humming beneath her like a machine coming back online. In a world still obsessed with algorithms, influence, and behavior prediction, she was an anomaly, a variable no one accounted for. And maybe that was enough. Not to stop it forever, but to remind them that not everything can be controlled. As she stepped away from the edge of the rooftop, her heart beat steady, her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would. But she had a truth no one could take from her now. And somewhere in the blur of rising light and shifting shadows, a new question waited, not what happens next, but who's really writing the script. That question would linger. Long after the screen fades to black. Now she moved between cities, never staying long enough to be noticed, always watching, always listening. She took a job under a different name, something simple, something quiet, customer support for a cybersecurity firm ironically built by one of Echo's former shell companies. Sometimes irony is the only currency the universe accepts. She didn't hack systems or chase conspiracies anymore, but every once in a while, someone would ping her through an encrypted thread, send her fragments of something suspicious, and she'd feel that familiar weight in her chest, the pull of unfinished business. Still, she resisted diving back in. The game was never really over, just paused between players. And then, one day, a letter arrived. No postage, no markings, just a thick white envelope left in her hotel mailbox in Portland. Inside was a single photo. The same one from her childhood on the beach with her father, holding a plastic shovel. But in this version, she was not alone. Behind her, blurred in the sunlight, stood a woman she didn't remember ever being there. The edges were clean, no signs of digital tampering, no traces of artificial enhancement. It was as if the woman had always been part of the picture. On the back, a single handwritten note, "Version 2 is watching. Are you ready to lead?" Her hands trembled as she folded the photo back into the envelope. It was over, but it also wasn't. The system had fallen, but the architecture remained. Someone else had picked up the blueprints. And now, whether she wanted it or not, she had become more than just the prototype. She was the precedent. The one who proved it could be done. Her story had been their test run, but she had rewritten the ending. Now, someone else out there was preparing the next chapter, and they were watching her just as closely as she had once been watched. She stood, feeling the morning breeze slide across her skin, the city humming beneath her like a machine coming back online. In a world still obsessed with algorithms, influence, and behavior prediction, she was an anomaly, a variable no one accounted for. And maybe that was enough. Not to stop it forever, but to remind them that not everything can be controlled. As she stepped away from the edge of the rooftop, her heart beat steady, her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. She didn't have all the answers, and maybe she never would. But she had a truth no one could take from her now. And somewhere in the blur of rising light and shifting shadows, a new question waited, not what happens next, but who's really writing the script. That question would linger long after the screen fades to black.